November was a pretty great month, I have to say. I managed to read a total of 8 books, which altogether added up to a total of 3,046 pages. So while I didn't read a massive amount of books, some of them were quite big. Starting off really quickly with the statistics, as always, I read 0 1-star books, 2 2-star books, 4 3-star books, 1 4-star book, and 1 5-star book. So the month was fairly average overall. I think my average rating comes out to be like 3.33 or something. I knew from basically the start of the month that this was going to happen because I just wasn't picking good books, and I really hope December goes a bit better. Genre-wise, I read 4 fantasy books, 2 thrillers, and 2 contemporary books, if we're counting The Secret Garden as a contemporary, since it was back when it was written. I don't really know what other genre to categorise it in other than classics, and that's not really a genre, so I don't know, contemporary it is. All of the 8 books that I read were backlist titles, which is good because that means I'm kind of chugging away at my backlist TBR. And 7 of the books were adult books and 1 was YA. I can't remember if I DNF'd anything in November, but if I did, I didn't write it down. As always, I'm proving myself to be the most organised booktuber out there. And now onto the books, because I'm sure that's why you're all here. The first one I read was Beartown by Fredrik Backman, and this is a translated works. I think it was originally written in like Danish or Norwegian or something, I don't really know. This is set in a small town in which everyone is obsessed with hockey. You know how small towns get, they find a sport and they do everything to support their team because that's the most important thing for them. It's showing like town pride and all sorts of stuff. It happens in my village as well. It's not healthy. One night at a party, one of the star hockey players rapes a young girl, and the book takes off from there. It's this whole thing about rape culture and how, since he's the star player, this girl must be lying and trying to bring him down. I quite like this book. It was fairly slow and kind of like quiet. I really ended up appreciating the slow start, and I grew to really love most of the characters. I didn't give this more than 3 stars because I feel like, first of all, the writing was quite difficult to get into. I don't know if that was the translation or Fredrik Backman's original writing style coming through, but I thought it was kind of disjointed and it didn't work so well in the beginning for me, but once I got used to it, it was a lot better. I thought that it ended really well. It ended kind of as I expected it to, and it was disheartening and horrible, but at the same time kind of hopeful. So I really enjoyed this one. I don't have a physical copy here because I had to return it to the library, and I would recommend it if it sounds like your kind of thing. The second book I read was The Child by Fiona Barton. This is an adult thriller. I gave it 3.5 stars. It follows the same reporter from The Widow, and at the beginning of the book, a baby's skeleton is found at a building site, and there are 2 characters that this majorly affects. The first one is someone whose baby was stolen from hospital as a newborn and she was never found. The second one used to live on the estate where the baby's body is found, and you don't really know why it affects her so much, but it kind of triggers her and you dive into her story as the book progresses. The journalist from the first book is uncovering this story and she wants to help the 2 women involved. And I thought this book was really, really good. I thought it was better than The Widow. I had more of a connection to the characters because now that we've got this journalist that we're following around for the series, that really helped me. But at the same time, it is kind of a standalone thriller and almost a procedural, and those don't really stand out all that much to me. I also have to say that the twist at the end was very, very obvious and the characters took far too long to catch on. If you know anything about like biology and DNA, even like the most basic amount, then you'll be able to figure out what this twist is. But nonetheless, I really enjoyed it. I find it very, very easy to get into Fiona Barton's writing style, and I do have a review copy of her next book that's coming out in January called The Suspect, which is following the same reporter. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. Shadows of Self by Brandon Sanderson. I gave this one 3.5 stars as well, and I'm not going to talk too much about it because it's a sequel. This is technically the 5th book in the Mistborn series, the first book in the new Mistborn trilogy. And I have to say, I'm really struggling to connect to any of these characters. I just don't care about them as much as I did the previous characters in the original trilogy with Vin and Kelsier. And even all of the secondary characters in that first trilogy stood out to me so much and I felt like part of the family. But in this one, I just don't have the same connection. There is like one character that I do kind of like, and then the others, even the main character, is very hit or miss for me. I don't really care about them. That said, this is a very fast-paced story. It's a lot shorter than his Mistborn books, and he's compacted quite a lot in here. I'm not such a fan of the world building in this one because I preferred the fantasy stuff that was going on in the first trilogy, whereas this incorporates fantasy and steampunk, and that's not something I super love. I will be continuing with this series because I want to see where it goes, especially because some things were revealed towards the end of the book that I'm kind of intrigued by. I'm not dying to read Bands of Mourning or anything, but I will be reading it at some point next year. Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. This one I gave 2 stars because what the hell was that? In case you don't know, this is an adult thriller and everyone's been hyping it up because apparently it's Sarah Pinborough's best work. It's said that if you don't like her previous books, you will love this one, guaranteed, because it's amazing. And to be honest, I was really enjoying it at the beginning and in the middle, and then the ending completely messed this book up for me. It's not because it was a good twist, it's because the twist didn't make any sense. It came out of nowhere, it completely changed genres, turning this from a thriller into something else entirely that I won't go into because of spoilers. I should probably explain what it's about before going off into a rant. Basically, there are 3 characters. There are David and Adele, who are married, and then there's Louise. David goes to work in Louise's office, and they start having an affair. But Louise and Adele also meet and become friends. Louise knows that all of this is happening. Adele knows that all of this is happening and is doing her own thing. But then there's David, who's completely clueless most of the time. I don't really know why Sarah Pinborough did what she did at the end, and I was considering doing a rant review on this, but to be honest, I didn't really care enough about it to be able to do a full review. I just needed a couple of minutes to rant because the ending just messed everything up and I'm so disappointed. I was ready to love this book because everyone else was, but the author did something really freaking weird and I didn't like it. In case you were wondering, I gave it 2 stars instead of 1 because I feel like at least the beginning was really good and interesting, and if the ending hadn't been there and it had gone somewhere else, then I probably would have really enjoyed this. The Last Namsara by Kristen Ciccerelli. This is a YA fantasy about dragons. The main character, Asha, is a dragon slayer. She is also responsible for her town or city burning to the ground. So even though she is the daughter of a king, she is not very well liked, and to improve her reputation so that the royal family becomes loved again, she has to kill the first dragon, who is meant to be the most powerful dragon in the world, and she accepts this challenge, and that's where the book takes off. It took me 2 days to read this one, even though it's nearly 500 pages, because I thought it was really, really good. It's not the most original story by any means. It's a YA fantasy. There's the love trope and dragons and kingdoms. There are a couple of plot twists that, again, were quite generic, but Kristen Ciccerelli has a really, really inviting and intriguing writing style. I think she's very talented, and this book completely gripped me, and I wasn't bored at all. I gave this one 4 stars. The Colour of Magic by Terry Pratchett. I finally finished this book, and I gave it 3 stars. I'm trying to work my way through the first 5 Discworld books to see if I want to carry on with the series, and I'm determined to read them in publication order, even though I know that the first few books aren't all that impressive, which I'm fine with because I've gone into it knowing this already. This book follows a wizard who is accompanying what is basically a tourist across the world, and shenanigans ensue. To be honest, I thought it was quite boring. The humour was too try hard for me. I feel like it was jumping about all over the place with no context and very little world building. I feel like either Terry Pratchett was trying to cram too much world building in that he didn't do anything, or that he just didn't do anything in this first book. That said, I will be continuing with the series because I've heard it gets a lot better from here. My favourite book of the month was The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This is the classic that I was talking about. I gave this one 5 stars. It's a reread for me. I read it when I was a lot younger and I loved it. This book is about a child called Mary whose parents die in India, and having grown up there, she is shocked and thrown off when she is taken to an English manor in the Yorkshire countryside to live with her uncle, I think. Here she meets people who really help her to find herself and become a better person instead of the spoiled brat that she was before, and she in turn helps them. And I just love this book. It's so well written and so easy to read, even though it's a classic. If you struggle with classics, then I think you should still try this book out because it's really easy to get into. And I think I'm going to try to read more classics next year because this one was such a hit for me. And finally, the last book I read in November and also finished on the last day of the month was Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. I am so glad that I have finally finished this book after a total of 4 attempts. I couldn't get into it the first 3 times. The 4th time was like, this is it, I have to do it, otherwise I have to get rid of the book. I didn't enjoy it. I gave this one 2 stars because it was shit. It's a new adult fantasy about a girl called Mia who goes to a school for assassins. Here she has to learn how to kill people, how to use poison and detect poison, and also how to manipulate guys. And maybe girls? I'm not too sure. I thought the writing was the worst thing about this book. I enjoyed the plot elements, but the writing was god-awful. Jay Kristoff is trying way too hard with this First of all, his writing is too flowery. It was unnecessary in a dark fantasy book, and it was like he was trying way too hard to impress the reader. Throw them off, maybe, with this flowery writing that oftentimes made absolutely no sense. And then my other biggest issue was the footnotes. They were on almost every page, and it took me out of the story, and people did say that I could ignore them, which I did end up doing about 50 pages in, because it made the story just nonsensical to me. But then I felt like I was missing out on a lot of world building, so ignoring the footnotes doesn't work, because in a fantasy book you want the world building, but instead Jay Kristoff didn't like incorporate the world building into the plot or the book. He decided to write footnotes for some weird reason. So yeah, I didn't like this book. I'm going to be doing a full review on it because I really need to rant about it. I thought it was crap, and the only reason I gave it 2 stars was because I liked Mia. Those are the 8 books that I read in November. Let me know if you would like full reviews on any of them. I'm quite happy to oblige. If you have read any of them as well, let me know your thoughts on them in the comments below, especially Nevernight. I would like to maybe discuss that, but you could also potentially save that for my review, which is going up this week. Thanks for watching my video, everyone, and I'll speak to you on my next one. Bye!